Alright guys, we are back today. We are going to be laying block on top of our footer here. Before then, yesterday my dad got started and finished up some of the sistering of all the studs on the existing house above the beam. And so, they're all 2 foot on center because the house was built in the 30s. So we sistered all those up with pressure treated and did that for the whole wall. So that way when we go back and install drywall and insulation, everything, that wall is taken care of and well supported. And then yesterday after work, I got started on the footer, and we put in about 6 or 7 blocks just to get a head start on that for the weekend. And the goal this weekend is to finish all of the CMU block, lay all of the footer, and then next week we can pour concrete in them and fill all the cells because we have rebar that we need to tie together in the top course. So really making that foundation wall complete. So big task, but the goal is to completely lay all of the block this weekend. Something that you weren't supposed to? Good mix.
Did I guess correctly? Need more holler. So I'm going to start cutting block.
Yep.
Because I'm going to need like 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5. I don't know what's going to happen down there yet.
Yeah, I don't think we can guess on that one yet.
We
I mean, we definitely need to cut the end out of this one.
You want just the end cut out? Or cut it just like these?
Just like that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cut the end and I'll chamfer that out.
Yep. Because it's going to be really close.
I figured I need at least 5 like that cut.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely 2. So like you can cut these 2 and we can figure it out. So I might need more. So what we're discussing here is our rebar isn't perfect, and that may be somewhat obvious by the line that's really close to the right side of the face of the CMU wall that I'm working on. We learned on the first leg that I did the night before that we were probably going to have some issues. The rebar just wasn't perfectly square from the house, so this line and these first 3 or 4 verticals here are just a little bit too far inside, and left to, or I guess in the depth of this video spacing, they're pretty good. The problem is it's almost impossible to put mud on the end of the block and then slip it over the rebar when it's too close to the edge. So what we were running into is it was like an inch, maybe an inch and a half away from the next block, and I just didn't have enough room to be able to slide the block over top of it, because you kind of have to come down on a 45 and then push it into the end of the block to get it to stick right and to keep the mud on the end of the block. So we were learning that it was just easier to cut the end out and make it like a U shape on the end, and it really was only just like a slit where the rebar was at for us to just push it on, instead of having to try and put it over and keep the mud on the end. So it was just complicated. But, you know, like I said, this is our first time doing this, and so we had a lot to learn, and this was part of our learning experience here. And so this was, you know, the first row was just learning in general how to do this, but this row was really kind of overcoming some challenges that we had. This first course of block takes a really long time because, you know, we just have a chalk line on the bottom essentially that we're going off of, and we're laying all of the mortar on. It just, the first row probably takes as long as the next 2 rows combined. You're setting the level all the way around, and so you're placing a lot of mortar, getting the block set, level, plumb, etc. So setting this first one took a long time, and it was critical that we did take our time, and overcoming our slight challenges here made this, among other things, made this really challenging. And, you know, we were still trying to figure out how to get the right consistency of mortar. And, you know, the sun was really giving us problems. It was drying the mortar out too fast, so we had to bring out the canopy. And so just, you know, huge learning curve on this one. And I think by the time we get to the end of this row, when we turn the corner, we start meshing really well, and we started laying block pretty quickly. But the first 3/4 of this wall in this first course took a lot out of us, and took a lot of learning very quickly to get a good method down. Another thing I should mention is we set up these string lines here that are tied to our blocks previously to starting all this. So this is giving us our overall wall height, and this ties to the existing house, so that way we can make sure that we're going to flush out where we want to. And so that part took, you know, easy couple hours, just doing cross measuring and up and down and checking all the corners and everywhere to make sure that we are laying this in the right spot, which is kind of why we're having some of the rebar issues. We probably should have done a little bit more measuring on the front end with the rebar, but that stuff kind of moves when we're in pouring and doing all the concrete work. So we were close there. It wasn't perfect, obviously, but, you know, I don't think we're perfect humans, so it was good enough for us, and we just had to do slight modifications to the wall. But we wanted to make sure that moving forward, that the CMUs were going to go in as perfectly as we could, and these string lines are helping with that. And so we had levels and lasers and all sorts of stuff to try and make sure that we were set up perfectly, as perfectly as we could with our string lines. I mean, I don't know shit about masonry, but that's a straight wall. You know? Know what I mean? Here we're triply, quadruply checking that this corner is in the right spot. So in theory, we have a 24-foot wide addition, so this should all course out. Obviously, we're not perfect, so we're maybe 3/4 of an inch off in the north-south, which would be left or right in this picture. So we're just extra making sure that this corner's in the right spot, because this corner obviously is super critical. And so yeah, we just spent a little bit of extra time checking all of our other measurements to make sure that this next couple blocks that we put in sets us up for success in the future, and it does. So this corner ends up being one of our better corners, coursing out wise. So we just had to really make sure that we were in the right spot. I swear to you, every time I start the camera, you have some of the most ridiculous things that you say.
Yeah, there'd be a little bit.
We gotta edit that out.
You gotta edit it. So, I have to. These look like they're going to be pretty close to being in line.
Yeah, I'm hoping these are, because based on this one, this row looked the straightest the whole time. And if it's in the center of that block, I feel better. It's just a matter of the distance now.
Like that one right behind you is going to have to be pulled over, but I think it's in the. They're all in line. When you look at that line,
I mean, because that's 32 on center perfectly. So that should hit in the center of that block just like that. That was the only thing I was concerned about, is if it's the center web, and we gotta start cutting the center webs out of things, that's gonna kind of suck. Yeah. But I'm hoping this side's better. It looks pretty even. Like it's in the center of the, like if you take out some of the irregularities
right
on this side, it looks like it's pretty even in the center of that footer.
right.
So like that, that's the other thing that's kind of like, okay, it's kind of. Some of my car friends just asked me how my car project
How your what?
was going. I'll send them a picture. So this is how it's going. So it should be kept in mind that, even though we do have some irregularities on the front end here with some of the placement of the rebar, we are tying all this in and filling all of the cells, grouting all the cells with concrete. And, the top beam that we get to a little bit later on is also going to be tied in together. So, overall, not really concerned about the, integrity of anything. It's all going to be tied together. We're not, structurally changing or modifying what's going to be happening here, and this part of the wall goes very smoothly. Everything courses out perfectly. We don't really have no real fights on this wall, so we definitely had to work through all of our challenges on the west end, but once we got to this last little leg, it was rolling pretty good for us. On to day two here. We start a little bit, halfway through this second course. So we did finish the first course on day one, which I think was a huge accomplishment. And we moved through second and third course a lot quicker. Like I said earlier, it's, the top two courses take about the same amount of time as the first one did. There was just so much, verifying and checking that our wall was in the right spot and located on the footer correctly, and dealing with some of the irregularities in the rebar. So we're moving pretty quickly on the second course here, and we'll get to the top course here in a little bit. I think that bit does a good job at showing how long it takes per block to install, and all the little nuances that go into it. You're spreading mortar on both sides of the block you're laying into. You're putting mortar on the new block. You're leveling. You're getting it into place and cleaning up the next block. So it does a really good job at representing how much time and effort went into each block, and why this whole overall process really took 2 full days at roughly 12 hours a day. As you can imagine, working, side by side all day, you talk about a lot of things, and we had just got done watching part of the Diddy documentary, and so I had to kind of go into all the explaining of some of the backstories on Tupac and Biggie and whatever. So it was just funny to have that moment explaining 90s 2000 rap with my dad. Here we're moving on to the last course, which is a bond beam. And so, for those of you who don't know, bond beam essentially has the top cut out of it into a U shape, which you can see here. And the intention is that this is grouted solid. And for us, we have 2 pieces of rebar running through to tie into all of the verticals. And so, what this does is it ties the uprights, which are tied into the footer horizontals, into the horizontals at the top of this wall. So making this a really rigid system. And, once we get to grouting, potentially in the next video, you'll see what that looks like. And you're just filling all these with concrete. So the bond beams lay the same as the other blocks. So you're you're putting a bed of mortar down on the block below, mortar on each of the ends and placing them. But yeah, you just have a open cavity on top to be able to fill up. As we move on to the last section here, I just want to give a little recap on the overall experience of laying block. And if you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is our first time ever laying block. My dad made it very clear that he wanted no part in helping, but he would be sure to support me, make as much mortar as I needed, give input as where needed. But he did not want to lay the block. So this was all me and figuring out as I went, and it turned out great. It was really great product at the end. Obviously some hurdles to get over, but hiring this out really wasn't an option for us, as is most of the project. And so at this point we had done all the rebar and we felt like, hey, we can probably go ahead and tackle this wall. So I think if you're thinking about doing it, there are a lot of resources out there and you can go ahead and give it a shot, and it's going to turn out great. I think everybody has a little bit of ability in there, and if you're determined enough, even if you mess up a few times, you can figure it out. And I just encourage you to go build and have fun with it.